In A Guardian's Promise, a story of compassion, strength, and resilience unfolds. Richard Monroe, a man whose wealth has kept him distant from the struggles of others, finds himself at a crossroads one stormy night. He encounters Anna, a homeless young girl, shivering from the rain and bearing scars from a troubled past. Compelled by an urge to protect and heal, Richard brings Anna into his life, discovering not only the trials she has endured, but also the remarkable strength hidden within her. As he takes on the role of her guardian, Richard's journey is fraught with challenges. Battling both external forces and his own internal doubts, he soon realizes that this journey is not only about helping Anna find peace, but also about his transformation from a businessman to a guardian. He begins a foundation dedicated to aiding abused children, hoping to make a lasting impact. Each chapter brings the reader closer to the powerful moments of love, trust, and redemption that define their bond, showing us that even the coldest of hearts can be warmed by the fire of compassion. Join this journey of hope, resilience, and the healing power of A Guardian's Promise. The rain hammered down on the city streets, relentless and unyielding. Richard Monroe, seated comfortably in the back of his luxury car, glanced out the tinted window. He was on his way home after another exhausting day at the office, his mind preoccupied with spreadsheets, investments, and tomorrow's endless meetings. He barely noticed the world outside, a world he had long distanced himself from, lost in the fortress of his wealth and success. But tonight, something caught his eye. As the car slowed at a red light, Richard noticed a figure huddled in the corner, sheltered only by a frail awning that did little to protect against the torrential downpour. It was a girl, shivering beneath a thin jacket, her head bowed as she clutched her arms to keep warm. "Sir?" his driver asked, noticing Richard's uncharacteristic attention to the street. "Pull over," Richard commanded, his voice unsteady. His driver hesitated but complied, pulling to the side of the road just as the light turned green. Richard opened the door, stepping out into the cold rain without a second thought. As he approached the girl, she looked up, startled by the tall, imposing figure before her. Her face was pale, streaked with rain, and her eyes held a mixture of fear and weariness. Richard felt his heart lurch, a rare sensation for him. He'd seen countless people, negotiated countless deals, but the vulnerability in this girl's gaze hit him with an unexpected force. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone softened by concern. She looked away, biting her lip as if to hold back words. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. Richard could see the bruises on her arms, the cuts on her hands, signs of a life marked by hardship and violence. Without waiting for her response, he removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders. "Come with me. It's too dangerous to be out here," he said, gesturing towards his car. She looked at him with hesitation, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to gauge his intentions. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. "Because no one should have to face a night like this alone," he replied simply. The ride to his apartment was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Richard wondered what had driven him to bring a stranger, a homeless girl, into his home. It was a decision unlike any he had made before. But something about her vulnerability, her silent plea for help, had broken through the walls he'd spent years building. When they arrived at his apartment, he led her inside, noting the way she looked around in awe at the grandeur of his surroundings. Richard handed her a towel and a fresh set of clothes, gesturing toward the bathroom. "You can use the shower," he offered. "Take your time." As she disappeared behind the door, Richard let out a long breath, his mind racing with questions. Who was this girl? What had happened to her? And why had he felt so compelled to help her? A few minutes later, she emerged, dressed in one of his shirts that hung loosely on her small frame. She looked vulnerable, yet there was a quiet strength in her eyes, a strength that surprised him. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone gentle. "Anna," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I'm Richard." There was a pause as they regarded each other, two strangers bound by the odd circumstances of the night. "Are you hungry, Anna?" She nodded, and for the first time, he saw a hint of a smile, a small gesture that seemed like a victory in the face of her pain. He ordered food, watching as she ate with quiet gratitude, struck the warmth of the apartment, beginning to replace the cold that had clung to her skin. Over the next few hours, as the rain continued to pound against the windows, Richard learned bits and pieces of her story. Anna had been on the streets for weeks, escaping from a life she could barely speak of without flinching. There had been abuse, neglect, a series of foster homes that offered no solace. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to trust. Richard felt a pang of guilt, knowing that he had spent years surrounded by luxury while people like Anna struggled to survive. He didn't know what he could do to help her, but he knew he couldn't just let her return to the streets. As the night wore on, Richard made a quiet promise to himself. He would help Anna, protect her in any way he could. The details would come later, but for now, he was certain of one thing. He could not ignore the pull of compassion he felt for her. As she settled onto the couch, finally drifting into a deep, exhausted sleep, Richard watched over her, feeling a surge of responsibility he hadn't anticipated. Perhaps, he thought, this night would change more than just her life. It might also change his own. Richard woke early the next morning, his thoughts lingering on the events of the night before. He poured himself a cup of coffee and took a seat by the large window overlooking the city. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a muted gray, casting a somber light over the morning. As he sat, sipping his coffee, he heard soft footsteps. He turned to see Anna standing in the doorway, wearing the clothes he had lent her, the sleeves falling over her hands. Her face was a mixture of apprehension and surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe where she was. "Good morning," Richard greeted, his voice calm and gentle. She nodded, her eyes shifting downward, avoiding his gaze. She still looked guarded, her shoulders hunched as if expecting some form of reprimand or harsh words. Richard felt a pang of empathy. This girl had lived her life on high alert, her instincts always tuned to survival. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, keeping his tone light. "Yes, thank you for everything," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded, understanding that gratitude came with a heavy burden for someone like her. She was unaccustomed to kindness, especially from someone who had nothing to gain. Richard wanted to tell her that she didn't owe him anything, that she didn't need to be grateful, but he sensed that words alone would never convince her of that. "Come, sit down," he said, gesturing to the kitchen table where he had prepared a simple breakfast. Anna took a seat, glancing at the food with visible hesitation. After a few moments of quiet, she finally began to eat, and Richard noticed the way her movements were slow, cautious, as if she was afraid that this kindness might vanish at any moment. "Anna," he began, "you don't have to tell me anything about your past, but if you ever want to talk, I'll listen." She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, and for a moment, Richard regretted bringing it up. But then she took a deep breath, her gaze still fixed on her plate. "I've been on my own for a long time," she began, her voice barely audible. "My mom died when I was little, and things were never right after that." She paused, swallowing hard, as if each word carried the weight of her past. Richard didn't push, he simply listened, letting her take her time. "I went through a lot of homes," she continued, her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of his shirt. "Some were fine, but others weren't." There was a silence, thick and heavy, as she seemed to gather her thoughts, her eyes distant. Richard felt his fists clench involuntarily as he imagined the things she must have endured, the scars that weren't visible to the naked eye. "Sometimes I'd run away. I figured the streets were safer than some of the places they put me," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But the streets, they have their own dangers." She didn't elaborate, but Richard could see the truth etched in her expression, the pain buried just beneath the surface. He felt a surge of anger at the system that had failed her, at the people who had treated her as disposable. "You don't have to go back," he said firmly. "Not to the streets or anywhere else that feels unsafe. I don't know what you need right now, but whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." Her eyes lifted, meeting his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. It was fragile, like a small flame that could be extinguished at any moment, but it was there. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a question loaded with doubt, as if she couldn't fathom why someone would care. Richard took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Because everyone deserves a chance to feel safe. And maybe I'm realizing that I need to do something meaningful with what I have." Anna looked at him for a long time, as if searching for any hint of deception. But all she found was sincerity. Slowly, she nodded, a hint of acceptance settling over her. Over the next few days, a routine began to form. Richard made arrangements with his assistant to work from home for a while, a decision that baffled his colleagues, but one he didn't feel the need to explain. He knew the situation was unusual, even risky, but he couldn't ignore the responsibility he felt for Anna. He'd crossed a line the night he brought her home, and he was committed to seeing this through. Anna grew more comfortable in his apartment, though she still moved cautiously, her eyes darting around as if expecting something to go wrong. Richard noticed the small things, a flinch when the door opened unexpectedly, a tense silence whenever he asked her a question. These were the marks left by years of fear and mistrust, scars that ran deep. One evening, as they sat together watching a movie, Richard saw Anna's gaze drift to the large windows that overlooked the city. Her expression was pensive, almost wistful. "What is it?" he asked, breaking the silence. She hesitated, then replied, "I used to look up at buildings like these, wondering what it would be like to live in one of them. They seemed so untouchable, like a different world." Richard nodded, understanding the divide she described. He had always lived in a world of privilege, a world where comfort and security were taken for granted. Anna's world had been the opposite, a world of survival where even a roof over her head was uncertain. "You don't have to go back to that world, Anna," he said softly. "Not anymore." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away, her pride still intact despite everything she had endured. "I don't know how to belong in this world," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't have to know right away," Richard assured her. "But I promise, you won't be alone while you figure it out." In that moment, he knew his decision to help her was more than an act of compassion. It was a commitment, a responsibility he was choosing to bear. Anna had come into his life by chance, but now he couldn't imagine turning his back on her. As the night wore on, they sat in silence, the city lights casting a warm glow around them. For Anna, it was the first time in years she felt a sliver of safety, a glimpse of a life beyond survival. And for Richard, it was a moment of clarity, a realization that this unexpected connection was about to change both their lives in ways they hadn't anticipated. The days turned into weeks, and the cautious rhythm that Richard and Anna had established began to feel almost natural. Richard's once immaculate apartment had taken on a different energy, a sense of warmth, of quiet laughter, and the subtle, surprising bond that was growing between them. Richard had never been the type to let people into his life easily, but something about Anna had softened his guarded heart. Her resilience, her quiet strength, and even the small tentative smiles that had started to appear all reminded him of what truly mattered. Each day, as he witnessed her progress, he felt more invested in her future, determined to give her a sense of security that she had been denied for so long. One evening, as they were finishing dinner, Anna looked across the table, her expression thoughtful. "Richard, I was wondering if I could maybe look for a job?" Richard blinked, surprised by the request. "A job? Why would you want to do that?" Anna fidgeted, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I don't want to feel like a burden. You've done so much for me already, and I want to be able to stand on my own." He understood her desire for independence. It was the same strength that had driven her to survive all those years. But the thought of her venturing out on her own, without the safety he could provide, filled him with unease. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't think you're ready for that just yet, Anna. Not because you're not capable, but there are still things we need to work through. You deserve time to heal, to focus on yourself without the pressure of survival." She looked up, her eyes searching his. "But for how long? I can't just live here forever, Richard." The vulnerability in her voice struck him deeply. She didn't want to feel like a charity case, and he didn't want her to feel that way, either. After a long pause, he leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Let's take it one step at a time. If you want to contribute, maybe we can start with small responsibilities here, in the apartment. And in time, when you're ready, we can talk about something more." A spark of determination lit in her eyes, and she nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "All right, I'll start with that." As the days passed, Anna took on small tasks around the apartment, cooking meals, organizing spaces, even learning how to manage small errands. Richard watched as she grew more confident, more comfortable. He was proud of her resilience, her willingness to rebuild a life piece by piece. But there were moments when her past would resurface, haunting her like shadows. Richard would sometimes find her staring out the window, lost in memories she wouldn't speak of, or waking from nightmares with a distant look in her eyes. During those times, he would simply sit beside her, offering his silent support until she could come back to the present. One evening, as they were sitting on the balcony, Anna broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder why you're doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the city below. Richard looked at her, seeing the weight of her question. "Sometimes, yes, but then I remember that everyone deserves a second chance, and I realize that helping you, it's also helping me. I think it's reminding me of what's important in life." Anna's gaze softened, and she nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. She opened up more with each passing day, sharing fragments of her past, of the hardships she had endured, the moments that had shaped her. Richard listened, never judging, always offering a safe space for her to unburden herself. It was during one of these conversations that she spoke about something that made Richard's heart ache. "There were times I felt invisible," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I didn't matter. I was just there, surviving. No one really saw me, not for a long time." Richard felt a surge of empathy, a fierce need to protect her from the pain that still lingered in her memories. He reached out, covering her hand with his own. "You matter, Anna. You're not invisible here. I see you." She looked at him, her expression softening with gratitude. It was a simple exchange, but it was the beginning of something profound, a bond rooted in mutual understanding, in the shared journey of healing. As weeks turned into months, Richard knew he was facing a decision. Anna was growing, blossoming into a person with hopes, dreams, and a strength that had been hidden beneath years of hardship. He could see it in the way she laughed more freely, in the confidence that began to color her voice. But he also knew that his temporary shelter would not be enough for her future. One afternoon, he met with his lawyer, asking questions about legal guardianship, support options, and the ways he could ensure Anna's well-being in the long term. The lawyer listened intently before speaking. "Richard, if you're serious about this, you should consider legal guardianship. It would give you the ability to make decisions on her behalf, to protect her legally. But it's not a simple process, especially if she's still technically under the care of the state." Richard nodded, absorbing the information. He knew it would be a challenge, but he was ready to take it on. Anna had become more than just a responsibility. She was part of his life, someone he deeply cared for. He couldn't imagine leaving her to face the world alone again. That evening, he sat down with Anna, his heart heavy with the weight of his intentions. He wanted to be transparent with her, to give her the choice she had always deserved. "Anna," he began, taking a steadying breath, "I've been thinking about your future. I don't want you to feel like you have to leave or that you're on your own again. So I'm considering applying for guardianship." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and disbelief evident in her expression. You would do that?" "Yes," he replied, his voice unwavering. "I would. It would give you the stability you need, a real chance to build a life." She was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on her hands. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "No one's ever fought for me before," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Richard's heart swelled with compassion, and he reached across the table, covering her hands with his own. "You're worth fighting for, Anna. You deserve a life where you feel safe, where you can grow without fear." For the first time, she let the walls around her heart crumble, her emotions spilling over in a way she had held back for so long. And in that moment, Richard knew that he had made the right choice. He would fight for her, for the girl who had shown him the value of kindness and compassion. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, bound by a connection that neither of them had anticipated, but that had changed them both. The decision to pursue legal guardianship for Anna brought Richard into a world he was unfamiliar with, one filled with paperwork, legal jargon, and bureaucratic red tape. As a businessman, Richard was no stranger to challenging negotiations and the complexities of the legal system. But this was different. This was personal, and it involved Anna's future, her safety, and a chance at the life she deserved. Richard's lawyer, an experienced family law attorney named Lisa, explained the steps they would need to take. The process for guardianship isn't easy, especially since Anna is still technically a ward of the state. You'll need to prove that you're fit to be her guardian, that you can provide a stable environment, and, most importantly, that you're committed to her well-being. Richard nodded, absorbing the information. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. Anna, who had been quietly listening, looked at Richard with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She had never had someone fight for her like this before, and the idea of someone going through so much trouble just for her felt overwhelming. Richard, she said, her voice tentative, you don't have to do all this. I can try to make it on my own. He looked at her, his expression gentle but firm. Anna, you don't have to do this alone anymore. You deserve stability, a chance to build a life where you feel safe. I promised I'd help you, and I intend to keep that promise. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worth fighting for. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with social workers, court officials, and psychological evaluations. Each step felt like an uphill battle, as Richard was repeatedly asked to prove his intentions and commitment. He could see the toll it was taking on Anna. Each interview and evaluation forced her to relive painful memories, to recount details of a past she would rather forget. One evening, after yet another round of questioning, Anna seemed unusually quiet. They sat in the living room, the silence between them filled with the weight of the day's events. "Are you okay?" Richard asked, concern etched in his expression. She took a deep breath, her eyes distant. I feel like I'm a problem. Like I'm making everything difficult for you." Richard moved closer, his voice steady and reassuring. "Anna, you're not a problem. You're a person who's been through far too much. And these obstacles, they're just part of the process to make sure you get the life you deserve." She looked up at him, her gaze filled with gratitude and vulnerability. "Thank you for everything." He smiled, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Anna, we're in this together, remember?" As they prepared for the final custody hearing, Lisa pulled Richard aside, her tone serious. "Richard, there's one last hurdle we need to address. The court may want to interview Anna's previous foster families or caretakers. It's possible they'll bring up objections or question your involvement in her life." Richard's jaw tightened. "What kind of objections?" "Some might argue that you're not qualified to care for her, that she would be better off in a state facility or foster home where she can be monitored. They may suggest that you're just helping her out of guilt or pity." The idea made Richard's stomach churn. He wasn't doing this out of obligation or pity. He genuinely cared about Anna and wanted to give her the stability she deserved. But he knew that proving this to a room full of strangers wouldn't be easy. The day of the final hearing arrived, and the atmosphere was tense. Richard sat beside Anna, feeling her anxiety as she fidgeted with her hands. He placed a reassuring hand on hers, giving her a supportive nod. She looked up, a spark of courage flickering in her eyes. When it was time for Richard to speak, he addressed the judge with honesty and conviction. "Your Honor, Anna deserves a life where she doesn't have to worry about where she'll sleep or who she can trust. I may not be a perfect guardian, but I care about her deeply. I want to give her a chance to build a future, to grow up without the constant fear of abandonment." He took a steadying breath, his voice unwavering. "She's not just someone I want to help, she's family to me now." The judge listened intently, her expression thoughtful. After a moment, she turned to Anna. "Anna, is there anything you would like to say?" Anna hesitated, glancing nervously at Richard before speaking. "I've been on my own for a long time, and I never thought someone would care enough to fight for me like this. Richard has given me hope, and for the first time, I feel like I have a place where I belong. I want to stay with him." Her words, spoken with such raw honesty, left a powerful impression on everyone in the room. The judge nodded, a faint smile breaking through her otherwise stern expression. She deliberated for a few moments before finally rendering her decision. Given the evidence and Anna's own wishes, I am granting temporary guardianship to Mr. Monroe, with the option to review the arrangement after 6 months. During this time, social services will conduct regular check-ins to ensure that Anna's needs are being met. Richard felt a surge of relief, but it was Anna's reaction that filled him with a sense of profound accomplishment. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out, grasping his hand tightly. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. "No," he replied softly. "We did it?" After the hearing, they returned to the apartment, where a quiet celebration awaited them. Richard had ordered her favorite meal and set out a small cake, something simple yet meaningful. Anna's eyes lit up when she saw it, a rare moment of pure joy breaking through the guarded exterior she had worn for so long. As they sat together, sharing the meal, Richard looked at her, his heart swelling with pride and a sense of purpose. He had fought for her, and she had fought for herself. Together, they had overcome an obstacle that once seemed insurmountable. That night, as he watched her drift off to sleep on the couch, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, a commitment to honor the trust she had placed in him, to protect and guide her as she began to rebuild her life. And for Anna, the night marked a turning point, a beginning of a new chapter in her life. She was no longer just surviving. She was finally starting to live, to believe in a future where she could be safe, loved, and free. Life slowly began to settle into a new normal after the custody hearing. Richard and Anna's days found a rhythm, one built around small routines and quiet moments of healing. The court's decision had been a monumental victory, but Richard knew it was only the beginning. Anna still carried wounds from her past, scars that would take time to heal. But with each passing day, Richard saw signs of resilience and growth in her, moments that filled him with pride and hope. One morning, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Anna turned to Richard, her expression serious. "I want to go back to school," she said, her voice steady yet tentative, as though afraid he might refuse. Richard looked at her, surprised but also impressed by her determination. "You're absolutely ready for that, Anna. If it's what you want, we'll make it happen." A flicker of excitement flashed in her eyes, and she smiled, a real, genuine smile that Richard hadn't seen often. "I want to finish high school, and maybe even think about college someday." "You can do anything you set your mind to," Richard replied, his tone full of conviction. "You're stronger than you know." They began preparing for Anna's enrollment in a local high school, a process that involved meeting with counselors, arranging classes, and discussing her academic background. The school administrators were supportive, and though there were some questions about her past, Richard handled them with care, keeping Anna's privacy and dignity intact. The first day of school was both exciting and nerve-wracking for Anna. Richard drove her there, sensing her anxiety as she sat in the passenger seat, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Remember," he said, giving her an encouraging smile, "you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just be yourself. Take things one step at a time." She nodded, drawing strength from his words. As they arrived at the school, she took a deep breath, glancing back at him with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Richard. I don't think I'd be here without you." He watched as she walked into the building, a mix of pride and protectiveness welling up inside him. This was a milestone, a testament to her courage and determination to build a future for herself. The first few weeks were challenging. Anna struggled to adjust to the social dynamics of high school, the cliques and unspoken rules that often made her feel like an outsider. But she persevered, finding small victories in her classes, discovering a love for literature, and slowly making friends who appreciated her quiet strength. At home, she would sometimes share stories about her day, small anecdotes about teachers, classmates, and the books she was reading. Richard listened, genuinely interested, finding joy in the little details that marked her journey of self-discovery. One evening, as they sat together over dinner, Anna spoke about a project she was working on for her English class. "We're supposed to write an essay about someone who inspires us, someone who's made a difference in our lives." She paused, glancing at him, her gaze thoughtful. "I think I want to write about you." Richard felt a lump form in his throat, surprised and deeply moved by her words. "Anna, you don't have to do that. But I want to. she replied firmly. "You've changed my life, Richard. I want people to know that there's good in the world, that there are people who care." He nodded, a smile breaking through the emotion that filled his chest. "Thank you, Anna. That means more to me than you'll ever know." As the months went by, Richard noticed that Anna was slowly shedding the fears and insecurities that had once held her captive. She was becoming more confident, more comfortable in her own skin. Yet there were still moments when her past would resurface, darkening her mood with memories she couldn't entirely escape. One afternoon, Richard found her sitting by the window, her gaze distant and troubled. He approached her quietly, sensing the heaviness in her expression. "Bad day?" he asked gently. She nodded, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "Sometimes, it just comes back. The memories, the things I went through. I try to forget, but it's like they're always there, waiting." Richard sat beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Healing isn't a straight line, Anna. There will be days when it feels like you're back where you started, but that doesn't erase all the progress you've made." She looked at him, the vulnerability in her gaze raw and unguarded. "Do you think I'll ever really be free from it?" He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know if the past ever completely goes away, but I do know that you're stronger than what happened to you. You've already come so far, and as long as you keep moving forward, those memories will lose their power over time." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away, nodding. "Thank you, Richard, for everything." In that moment, Richard realized that his role in Anna's life went beyond just providing for her. He was her anchor, her safe haven, in a world that had often been cruel and unforgiving. And he was willing to stand by her for as long as she needed, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. Their bond continued to grow, shaped by shared moments of trust, vulnerability, and hope. With each passing day, Anna found herself believing in the future, daring to dream of a life where she could be happy, where she could build something meaningful. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Anna spoke up, her tone filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I've been thinking, maybe one day I could help other kids who've been through what I went through," she said. "Maybe I could make a difference, like you did for me." Richard felt a swell of pride and admiration. "You'd be incredible at that, Anna. Your story, your strength, it would inspire so many people." She smiled, a hopeful glint in her eyes. "I think that's what I want to do. I want to be there for others, just like you were there for me." In that moment, Richard knew that Anna had found her purpose. Her journey was far from over, and there would undoubtedly be more obstacles along the way. But he was certain that she would overcome them, just as she had overcome so much already. Together, they stood at the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter built on resilience, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. And as they looked toward that future, Richard knew that he had been changed as much as Anna had. She had shown him the power of compassion, the strength that comes from vulnerability, and the beauty of a life touched by purpose. They were no longer just a guardian and his ward. They were family, bound by a connection that had transformed them both. As Anna settled further into her new life, both she and Richard found themselves facing challenges they hadn't anticipated. Although the routine of school and home brought a certain stability, the realities of her past had left her with scars that didn't heal overnight. Small triggers, unfamiliar faces, unexpected loud noises, or even well-meaning classmates who asked probing questions could bring back memories she struggled to keep at bay. But Anna was determined. She wanted to prove, not just to Richard, but to herself, that she could overcome her past and build a future on her own terms. Richard saw her commitment and admired her courage, but he also understood that she was carrying more than any young girl should. He wanted to help lighten her burden, to give her a chance to thrive rather than just survive. One afternoon, while waiting for her outside the school, Richard received a call from her counselor. "Mr. Monroe," the counselor began, her tone cautious but warm. "I wanted to reach out to discuss Anna's progress. She's doing well academically, but we've noticed she sometimes isolates herself, particularly during group activities." Richard listened intently, worry tugging at him. "Is there anything specific that's troubling her?" "She's been very independent, which is understandable given her background," the counselor replied. but she might benefit from joining an extracurricular activity or a small club. It could help her build friendships, find a place where she feels she belongs. Richard thanked the counselor and promised to speak with Anna about it. Later that evening, as they ate dinner, he brought it up gently. "Anna, your counselor mentioned you're doing really well in your classes," he began, watching her face light up with pride. "Yeah, I like it," she admitted, her smile small but genuine. "I feel like I'm finally learning things that matter." "There was something else she mentioned," he continued, keeping his tone casual. "She thought maybe you'd enjoy joining a club or an activity. You know, something that's just for fun." Anna's expression faltered, and she glanced down, fidgeting with her fork. "I don't know. I've never really done things like that." "I understand," Richard said, offering her a reassuring smile. "But it might be a good way to meet people, to make friends outside of class. You don't have to decide right now, but it could be a chance to try something new." She nodded, seeming to consider it. After a moment, she looked up, a hesitant question in her eyes. "What kind of club would I even join?" "Well, there's usually something for everyone," he replied, thinking back to his own school days. "Art, drama, sports, maybe something with writing or reading if that interests you." She thought about it, her expression softening. "I do like writing, and I've been reading a lot more lately. Maybe something like that." Richard felt a surge of hope. "That sounds perfect. Why don't you ask about it at school tomorrow? Just see what's out there." She nodded, a hint of excitement in her eyes. "I'll think about it." A few days later, Anna found herself nervously walking into the school's book club meeting. She had nearly talked herself out of it, her old anxieties whispering doubts in her mind. But Richard's words, his unwavering support, pushed her forward, reminding her that this was a chance to step beyond her comfort zone. The club was small, just a handful of students who gathered weekly to discuss novels and share their own writing. At first, Anna felt out of place, her usual nervousness making her feel like an outsider. But as the meeting went on, she realized that these were people who shared her interests, who were passionate about the same stories and characters that had comforted her during her darkest moments. The group leader, a senior named Lucy, noticed Anna's quietness and invited her to share something if she felt comfortable. Anna hesitated, her mind racing, but something about the warmth in Lucy's smile gave her the courage to speak. I've been working on a short story," Anna said softly, her voice barely audible. "It's not finished, but it's something I've been thinking about." The group encouraged her, and with a deep breath, Anna shared a few lines. As she spoke, her words filled the room, drawing in her listeners with the quiet intensity she'd poured into the story. When she finished, there was a respectful silence, followed by murmurs of appreciation. Lucy smiled, her eyes bright with admiration. "That was beautiful, Anna. I can't wait to hear more." For the first time in a long while, Anna felt a sense of belonging. The book club became her sanctuary, a place where she could explore her thoughts, express herself, and connect with others who valued her for who she was, not what she had been through. As her involvement in the book club grew, so did her confidence. She began to bring home books, reading late into the night, her imagination coming alive in ways she had never experienced before. Richard noticed the change in her, the newfound excitement that colored her voice as she shared her stories with him, describing characters and plot twists with a passion he hadn't seen in her before. One evening, as they discussed one of her favorite novels, Anna hesitated, then looked up at him with a hopeful expression. "Richard, what if I tried to write a book someday?" she asked, her voice tentative but filled with a quiet determination. He smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Anna, and I have no doubt you'd write something incredible." She beamed, her eyes alight with possibilities. Maybe I could write stories that would help others, like books have helped me." Richard nodded, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they were on. Anna's healing wasn't just about leaving her past behind. It was about discovering the parts of herself she had yet to explore, the dreams she had never dared to believe were possible. Their bond grew deeper with each passing day, built on trust, respect, and a shared journey toward healing. And as they sat together that evening, surrounded by books and stories of hope, they both knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be. As Anna grew more comfortable and independent, Richard's commitment to providing her with a stable, long-term home became even more resolute. Temporary guardianship had given him the opportunity to protect her, but he knew that for Anna to truly feel secure, he would need to pursue permanent guardianship. This step would cement his role in her life, ensuring that she would always have a safe place to call home. One evening, he broached the subject with Anna. She was sitting at the dining table, scribbling notes for a new story idea when he sat across from her, a warm yet serious expression on his face. "Anna, I wanted to talk to you about something important," he began. She looked up, sensing the gravity in his voice. "What's on your mind?" Richard took a breath. "I've been thinking about the future, and I'd like to pursue permanent guardianship. It would mean that, legally, I'd be your guardian until you're of age. You wouldn't have to worry about moving around or the state stepping in." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and relief flashing across her face. "You'd really do that? Make it permanent?" He nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, if it's what you want to. I want you to feel safe, Anna. I want you to know that you'll always have a home here, with me." She looked down, her hands clasped tightly, and when she looked back up, there were tears in her eyes. "I don't even know what to say. No one's ever wanted me like this. I've always felt like I was just passing through people's lives." Richard's heart ached at her words. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "You're not passing through anymore, Anna. You belong here." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Richard. I want that too. I want this to be home." With her blessing, Richard set the process in motion. He consulted with Lisa, his lawyer, who laid out the necessary steps and warned him that the journey could be challenging. The state would want to ensure that Anna's best interests were protected, and they might scrutinize his life and motivations even more than they had before. As the guardianship case moved forward, they faced an unexpected obstacle. A representative from social services requested an in-depth review of Anna's living situation, interviewing both Richard and Anna to ensure that the arrangement was truly beneficial. Richard braced himself for this scrutiny, knowing that his intentions were genuine, but fearing that the bureaucratic process might not fully understand the connection he and Anna had built. During one of these interviews, a social worker, Miss Carter, sat across from them in Richard's living room. Her demeanor was polite but direct, and Richard sensed that she had come prepared to challenge them. "Anna," Miss Carter began, her tone professional, "we're here to make sure this arrangement is in your best interest. You've had a difficult past, and we want to be certain that you're receiving the support you need." Anna nodded, her face calm yet determined. "I understand. Can you tell me why you feel Mr. Monroe is the right person to be your guardian?" Miss Carter asked, her gaze intent. Anna hesitated, glancing at Richard before answering. "Richard, he's the first person who ever made me feel like I belong. He listens, he cares, and he doesn't treat me like a problem or a burden. I trust him." Miss Carter nodded, her pen scratching across her notepad. "And you, Mr. Monroe? Why are you pursuing permanent guardianship?" Richard took a steadying breath. "Because Anna deserves stability, a real home. She's been through more than anyone should have to endure, and I want her to know that she's safe, that she doesn't have to be afraid of losing her place in the world anymore." Miss Carter studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "And you're prepared for the long-term responsibility? Raising a teenager, even one as resilient as Anna, is no small task." Richard met her gaze, his voice resolute. "I am. Anna has become family to me, and I'm committed to being there for her, no matter what." After the interview, both Richard and Anna were left feeling unsettled. They had been open and honest, yet the questions had felt invasive, a reminder of the challenges they still faced. But despite the tension, Anna remained hopeful. The guardianship process was not just about paperwork or legal status. It was about the promise Richard had made to her. The promise of a home, a future, and someone who would stand by her side, no matter the cost. A few weeks later, Miss Carter returned, this time with a more favorable update. "Mr. Monroe, Anna," she began with a warm smile, "I'm pleased to inform you that, after reviewing your case, the state is prepared to approve permanent guardianship. You'll be officially registered as Anna's legal guardian." The relief in Anna's eyes was unmistakable, and Richard felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He reached out, pulling her into a gentle embrace, whispering words of reassurance. "See," he said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You have a home now, a real one." The next few days were a quiet celebration for both of them. With the guardianship finally official, Anna seemed to blossom, her confidence growing as she fully settled into the life they had built together. She continued with her writing, attended her book club, and even started making plans for the future, talking about college, her ambitions, and the dreams she had only recently dared to imagine. One evening, as they were tidying up after dinner, Anna turned to Richard, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, I used to think my life was just about surviving, getting through one day at a time," she said quietly. "But now, for the first time, I actually believe there's something more for me, that I could be someone who makes a difference." Richard smiled, his heart full of pride. "You already are, Anna. You've made a difference in my life, and I know you'll continue to inspire others." She looked down, a shy smile tugging at her lips. Maybe I'll write stories about kids who've been through what I have, show them that there's hope, that they're not alone." "That sounds like a beautiful idea," he said, his voice filled with encouragement. "Your story, your strength, it'll help others in ways you can't even imagine." They spent the rest of the evening talking about her ideas, about the stories she wanted to tell, and the lives she hoped to touch. And as they shared their dreams and hopes for the future, Richard realized just how far they had both come. Their lives, once marked by isolation and uncertainty, had become intertwined in ways that neither had expected, but that both cherished deeply. That night, as Richard watched her contentedly lost in her thoughts, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had stepped into Anna's life as a stranger, but now he was her family, her guardian, and her greatest supporter. The road ahead might still hold challenges, but together he knew they could face anything. With the guardianship finalized, Richard felt a newfound sense of purpose. His journey with Anna had transformed him, opening his eyes to the struggles and injustices faced by so many young people in difficult circumstances. The experience made him realize that he wanted to do more, not just for Anna, but for others who, like her, had been dealt an unfair hand in life. One evening, as they were talking over dinner, he brought up an idea he'd been considering for a while. "Anna, I've been thinking," he began, his tone thoughtful. "What if we created something together? A foundation, maybe. Something that could help other kids who need support, like you did." She looked at him, her eyes widening with surprise and excitement. "A foundation? You mean like helping kids who don't have anywhere else to go?" "Exactly," Richard nodded, smiling at her enthusiasm. "There are so many children out there who feel invisible, who have nowhere to turn. We could create a place for them, a safe space where they can find resources, counseling, and support. A chance to heal, just like you're doing now." Anna's face lit up, and she nodded eagerly. "I love that idea. I know what it's like to feel alone, and if we can help even one person find a way out of that darkness, it would mean everything to me." Richard felt a swell of pride. "Then let's make it happen." The next few months were a whirlwind of planning and organizing. Richard used his business acumen to secure funding and reach out to potential donors, while Anna lent her insight and passion to the project, helping him understand the real needs of the children they aimed to support. They discussed everything, from the types of programs the foundation would offer to the kinds of people they wanted on their team. People who genuinely cared and understood the importance of compassion and resilience. They decided to name the foundation Second Chances, a tribute to the hope and renewal that had brought them together. Anna was deeply involved in every aspect, sharing her own ideas for mentorship programs, educational support, and even workshops on self-expression through writing and art. As the foundation started to take shape, they organized a launch event, inviting supporters, community leaders, and potential beneficiaries. Anna, nervous but determined, agreed to speak at the event. She wanted to share her story, to let people see the impact that kindness and opportunity could have. On the evening of the launch, the room was filled with anticipation. Anna stood backstage, her heart racing as she rehearsed her speech in her mind. Richard placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, offering her a reassuring smile. "You're going to do great, Anna," he said softly. "Just speak from your heart. She nodded, taking a steadying breath. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, all eyes on her. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze settling on Richard, who stood at the back, his expression filled with pride. "My name is Anna," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I know what it's like to feel invisible, to wonder if anyone cares, if anyone sees you. I spent years just trying to survive, feeling like I was on my own in a world that didn't want me. But then, someone reached out to me. Someone gave me a second chance." She paused, gathering her courage as she continued. "That's what this foundation is about. It's about giving hope to those who feel like there's none left, about showing people that they're not alone. I'm here today because someone believed in me, and I want to pass that belief on to others. If we can help even one child find their way out of the darkness, then this foundation will have succeeded." The audience erupted into applause, and as she stepped off the stage, Richard was there to greet her, pride shining in his eyes. "You were amazing, Anna," he said, his voice filled with admiration. She smiled, a mixture of relief and joy in her expression. "Thank you, Richard, for everything. I never would have been here without you." "You did this, Anna. I'm just honored to be a part of it." The success of the launch event marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. Second Chances quickly became a respected organization in the community, providing support to children and teenagers who had nowhere else to turn. Richard poured his heart into the foundation, working tirelessly to secure funding, organize programs, and advocate for policy changes that would protect vulnerable youth. Anna continued to be an integral part of the foundation, using her story to inspire others and helping to mentor younger children who were just beginning their journeys of healing. She often led writing workshops, encouraging the children to express themselves and find strength in their voices. Her passion and dedication left a lasting impact on everyone she worked with, and she found a deep sense of fulfillment in knowing that she was making a difference. Through the foundation, they built a community, a place where kids could find safety, guidance, and the kind of understanding that only comes from shared experience. And for Anna, Second Chances became more than just a foundation. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to the life she had rebuilt with Richard's support. One evening, as they were locking up the office after a long day, Anna turned to Richard, her expression thoughtful. Do you think we'll ever reach everyone who needs help?" she asked softly. Richard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We may not reach everyone, but as long as we keep trying, as long as we make a difference in the lives we do touch, then we're doing something meaningful." She nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "You're right. Every life we help is a victory." He looked at her, seeing the strength and compassion that had blossomed within her. "You've come so far, Anna. I'm incredibly proud of you." "Thank you, Richard," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "for giving me my second chance and for believing in me." They walked out of the building together, side by side, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done settling over them. And as they stepped into the night, they knew that the journey they had embarked upon together was far from over. They were bound not just by circumstance, but by purpose. A purpose that would carry them forward, touching countless lives along the way. The foundation, Second Chances, had grown beyond what Richard and Anna had initially envisioned. Word spread quickly, and soon, children and teenagers from all walks of life came seeking support, finding hope within the walls of the foundation. Richard was deeply committed to the cause, dedicating much of his time and resources to ensure that the foundation thrived. Yet, despite the foundation's success, he found himself facing new challenges. Managing the growing organization was demanding, and as more children came in with unique and complex needs, the workload grew heavier. Richard realized that he couldn't handle everything alone. He needed a dedicated team, a group of people who shared his passion and could help carry the weight of this mission. One evening, he sat with Anna, discussing the future of the foundation. She had become his confidant and partner, and her insights were invaluable to him. "I think it's time to bring more people on board," he said, his voice thoughtful. "The foundation is expanding so quickly, and there are more children who need help than we ever anticipated." Anna nodded, her gaze filled with understanding. "You're right. We need people who believe in what we're doing, who can help us reach even more kids. They began searching for individuals who were not only skilled, but who also shared their commitment to making a difference. They hired social workers, therapists, and counselors, people who could provide the specialized care and guidance that the children needed. Richard and Anna interviewed each person personally, ensuring that every new team member understood the foundation's values and vision. With a strong team in place, the foundation entered a period of rapid growth. The programs expanded, and they established partnerships with local schools, shelters, and community organizations, creating a network of support for at-risk youth. The impact of second chances became evident as more and more success stories emerged. Young people who had found hope, education, and a path to a better life through the Foundation's programs. Despite the demands of running the Foundation, Richard remained closely involved with the children. He made it a point to connect with each one, listening to their stories, encouraging their dreams, and offering them the kind of support he had once given Anna. For him, this work was not just a responsibility, it was a calling that filled him with purpose and fulfillment. Anna, meanwhile, had become an inspiration to many of the children. She openly shared her story, showing them that it was possible to overcome hardship and create a meaningful life. She had found her purpose, and every time she saw the impact of her words on a young person's face, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and accomplishment. As the Foundation continued to grow, Richard began to reflect on how much his life had changed since he'd met Anna. She had come into his life unexpectedly, and in helping her, he had discovered a path he'd never imagined for himself. What had started as an act of compassion had transformed into a mission that gave his life a newfound depth and meaning. One night, as they were closing up the Foundation after an event, Richard looked around at the space that had become a second home for so many. "I never thought my life would turn out like this," he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. "Building this foundation, helping these kids, it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done." Anna smiled, her expression filled with pride and gratitude. "You changed my life, Richard. And now you're changing so many others. I think this is exactly where you're meant to be." He looked at her, feeling a swell of emotion. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Anna. You're the reason I started this journey. You're my inspiration." She blushed, but there was a sense of confidence in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." They stood in silence for a moment, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, and the bond they had formed, a bond that went beyond words, beyond any title or legal status. They were family, united by a shared mission and a profound sense of purpose. A few days later, Richard received an invitation to speak at a conference for community leaders, an event that would bring together influential figures from across the region. The theme was empowering youth, and the organizers wanted him to share the story of second chances to inspire others to take action in their own communities. He was initially hesitant. Public speaking had never been his strength, but Anna encouraged him. "People need to hear your story, Richard," she said. "You've created something amazing, and if sharing it can inspire others to help, then it's worth it." Taking her words to heart, Richard agreed to speak at the conference. As he stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. But as he began sharing the story of how second chances had come to be, his apprehension faded, replaced by the passion and dedication he felt for the Foundation. "I once thought that success was about building wealth, about securing my own future," he told the audience. "But I've learned that real success, real fulfillment, comes from helping others. When you see a young person who was once struggling, who now has hope, who believes in themselves, that's worth more than any financial gain." He concluded his speech with a heartfelt plea. Every child deserves a second chance, a chance to feel safe, loved, and supported. If we can give that to even one person, then we've made a difference. The audience erupted into applause, and as he stepped off the stage, Richard felt a profound sense of pride. He had shared his journey, his purpose, and he hoped that his words would inspire others to take action. When he returned home that evening, Anna was waiting for him, her face alight with excitement. "You were incredible," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. I watched the live stream. They were all hanging on to every word you said. Richard smiled, a mixture of pride and humility in his expression. I was just telling the truth. Everything we've built here, everything we've done, it's because of you, Anna. Tide, you showed me what really matters. They spent the rest of the evening reflecting on the journey they had taken together, on the challenges they had overcome, and the countless lives they had touched. For Richard, the foundation was more than just an organization. It was a testament to the power of compassion, to the difference that one person could make in another's life. As they closed up for the night, Richard felt a deep sense of contentment. He had found his calling, his purpose, and he knew that, with Anna by his side, he could continue this work for years to come. They had built something lasting, something that would continue to touch lives long after they were gone. In that quiet moment, he realized that his commitment to Anna had become a commitment to something greater, a promise to himself, to her, and to every child who needed a second chance. Years passed and second chances flourished, evolving into an essential support network for vulnerable children and young adults. Under Richard's guidance, the foundation expanded to include scholarship programs, vocational training, and therapy services, each designed to empower young people to build their futures. Anna, now a young adult, had become a powerful advocate and leader within the organization, her story a beacon of hope for all who encountered her. One afternoon, Richard watched as Anna led a workshop for a group of teenagers. She moved with confidence and empathy, connecting with each participant on a level that few could achieve. She had found her voice, and it was clear that she was as much a part of the foundation's soul as he was. Seeing her passion and strength, he felt a profound sense of pride, not just in what they had built together, but in the person she had become. Later that evening, they sat in his office, going over plans for the foundation's upcoming anniversary celebration. "Can you believe it's been 10 years? Richard asked, a hint of disbelief in his tone. Anna smiled, her eyes soft with nostalgia. "Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday, but when I look at everything we've done, everyone we've helped, it feels like a lifetime." He nodded, sharing in her sentiment. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Anna. This foundation, this family, it's as much yours as it is mine." She looked down, a mixture of gratitude and humility in her expression. "You gave me a second chance, Richard, and now we're giving that chance to so many others. It's the most meaningful thing in my life." As they planned the details of the celebration, Richard found himself reflecting on the journey they had shared. He had once been a man solely focused on his own success, but Anna had shown him that true fulfillment came from lifting others, from building something that would outlast him. He had found his purpose, and through that purpose, he had found a family. The day of the anniversary celebration arrived, and the event hall was filled with supporters, former beneficiaries, and friends of the foundation. The room buzzed with excitement as people shared stories of how second chances had changed lives, offering new beginnings to countless young people. As the evening progressed, Richard took the stage to share a few words, his heart swelling with emotion as he looked out over the crowd. He glanced at Anna, who stood proudly among the audience, her face glowing with pride. "When we started this journey," he began, his voice filled with sincerity, "I never imagined that it would lead us here." Second Chances was born from the desire to help one person, to make a difference in just one life. But along the way, it became something much bigger, a community, a family. He paused, glancing at Anna. "I owe much of this to someone very special. Anna came into my life at a time when I didn't realize how much I needed change. She showed me the strength that comes from compassion, from second chances. And together, we built this foundation, not just for her, but for everyone who needs a place to belong." The crowd erupted into applause, and Anna's eyes shimmered with tears as she mouthed, "Thank you." She had never been one to seek the spotlight, but tonight, she allowed herself to feel the weight and significance of her journey. Richard continued, his voice steady and filled with purpose. "My hope is that second chances will continue to grow, to reach new hearts and new lives, and that each of you here will take with you the spirit of this foundation. Together, we can make sure that no child ever feels invisible, that every young person knows they are seen, valued, and loved." As he stepped off the stage, Anna met him with a hug, her gratitude and love radiating through her embrace. "You've changed so many lives, Richard," she whispered, "including mine." After the event, as they sat together in the quiet of his office, Richard shared a decision he had been considering for some time. "Anna," he began, his tone gentle yet resolute, "I think it's time for me to step back a little. The foundation is in good hands. Your hands. You're ready to lead." She looked at him, surprise mingling with a hint of sadness. "But this is your legacy, Richard. You built this." "We built this," he corrected, a proud smile on his face. "And you're more than capable of taking it forward. You understand these kids, their struggles, their dreams. You've lived it, and that's something no amount of experience or money can replace." Anna's eyes filled with emotion, and she reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'll make you proud. I promise." "I have no doubt you will," he replied softly. "You already have." In the years that followed, Anna took the helm of Second Chances, expanding its reach and deepening its impact. Under her leadership, the foundation continued to grow, helping thousands of children find hope, safety, and a path to a brighter future. Richard, though semi-retired, remained involved, offering guidance and support, watching with pride as Anna carried on the mission they had started together. Through her work, Anna honored the legacy that Richard had created, ensuring that his vision would continue to touch lives for generations to come. And for Richard, seeing her thrive was the ultimate fulfillment, a testament to the power of compassion, of second chances, and of the family they had found in each other. In the end, Second Chances was more than just a foundation. It was a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of the life-changing power of one person's commitment to making a difference. And as long as it stood, it would carry forward the legacy of a guardian's promise, a promise that would never be forgotten. The end.